The cold was the last thing she remembered, a silence so sharp it carved through her ribs and hollowed the breath inside her. The snow fell like shattered glass from a broken sky, each flake burning as it kissed her skin. She could not tell where the storm ended and she began. Her body had become part of the white, fading with every trembling heartbeat. The moon hung above her like a blind eye, watching unblinking, as if it too had grown tired of mercy. Beneath that pale witness, she stood alone, her feet buried in frost, our tears freezing before they ever touched the ground. Wind crawled through her hair, threading the strands into a crown of ice. The scent of pine and blood filled the night, faint reminders of the pack that had turned away, their howls fading into the distance. She could still hear the last one, the voice that once whispered her name, now lost in the blizzard's roar. They had called it mercy when they left her to the snow, but mercy should not taste of iron and ash. Mercy should not echo with laughter. Each breath she drew felt borrowed from the storm, each blink a rebellion against sleep. The cold was patient. It did not strike all at once. It stole her slowly, fingertip by fingertip, memory by memory. She tried to remember the warmth of a fire, the comfort of fur against her cheek, the steady rhythm of hearts beating in unity. But those memories crumbled, scattering into frost and wind and still. Somewhere deep within the numbness, something in her refused to yield. A spark, small, stubborn, defiant, flickered beneath her ribs. It whispered not of life, but of vengeance. The moonlight caught her eyes one final time before the darkness took her. The cold claimed her body, but fate, watching quietly from the shadows, was not yet done. Asterisk, they had called it mercy. Those were the words her alpha spoke as the snow swallowed her cries. But mercy, she realized, was only the name cowards gave to cruelty when they wished to sleep without guilt. The moment they turned their backs, she saw it clearly, the truth hidden beneath their pitying eyes and solemn bows. They did not leave her because she was weak. They left her because she reminded them of what they had lost: innocence, loyalty, and the heart they'd buried long before winter came. The wind carried their scents long after they vanished: pine resin, wet fur, bloodlust. She could taste it still on her tongue, bitter and cold. Her knees buckled beneath the weight of it, and the world tilted, spilling her into the drifts. Snow rose around her face like hands, pulling her down, whispering lullabies that spoke of surrender. Yet even as her body trembled, her soul remained awake, watching through the blur of snowflakes and betrayal. She remembered how the Alpha's gaze had lingered, not with love, but calculation. He had needed a reason for the pack's unrest, and she had given him one simply by existing. "You are too kind," he had said once, a cruel smile hidden behind praise. Kindness makes you fragile, she understood. In a world where strength was measured by blood spilled and throats torn, kindness was the easiest throat to cut as the blizzard deepened. She whispered their names into the darkness, each syllable trembling, half prayer, half curse. Her voice cracked, stolen by the cold before the storm could carry it. Around her, the forest moaned under the weight of the wind, trees bowing like mourners at a funeral that heaven refused to bless. They had called it mercy, but mercy would have killed her quickly. This was punishment. Each gust of wind tore at her skin like the claws of ghosts she once called kin. The storm had no mercy left to give, only hunger, an endless devouring of sound, warmth, and will. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, feeling for a heartbeat that faltered like a candle fighting the dark. Her breath came shallow, uneven, each exhale a fleeting ghost disappearing before her eyes. The snow blinded her, smothering the world into a blur of white and silence. Her legs moved without purpose, guided by instinct long after strength had abandoned her. The trees stood like silent judges, their branches heavy with ice, their shadows stretching toward her like accusations. Beneath her bare feet, the earth cracked and moaned, a warning she was too numb to hear. Her vision wavered. She thought she saw shapes in the distance, wolves with familiar eyes, watching. But they were nothing more than echoes, the storm's cruel mimicry of faces she once trusted. Then the ground disappeared. A sudden drop, a weightless gasp, and the world shattered. The fall was silent. Not even the snow dared to break it. Pain exploded through her leg, sharp and immediate, then dulled into a deep, pulsing ache that made her teeth clench. She tried to scream, but the wind stole the sound from her throat. Her body twisted, landing hard among rocks half buried in frost, and the snow closed in again, burying her beneath its quiet rage. For a while, there was only the rhythm of her heart, slow, stubborn, refusing to die. Her fingers clawed weakly at the ground, trying to rise, but even the air seemed to hold her down. The storm's voice whispered around her, soft and cruel, "Rest now, little wolf." She closed her eyes. In the darkness, she saw the moon, cold and distant, and behind it, something else, a shadow with eyes of gold. Watching her fall, for a long while she lay there, unmade, a figure of snow and sorrow, half buried in the whiteness that wanted to claim her. The world had narrowed to the sound of her breathing, fragile as frost on glass. The storm had lost its voice now. Even the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath as if afraid to disturb her dying. Her fingers twitched, searching for warmth that no longer existed. The blood from her wound spread across the snow in delicate crimson branches, a flower blooming in winter, proof that she had once been alive. Above her, the moon drifted behind clouds, turning the night into silver dusk. The forest whispered in languages older than wolves, its voice low, mournful. She thought she heard footsteps, but perhaps it was only the heartbeat of the earth slowing to match her own. For the first time, she wondered if death was truly the end or simply another kind of calling. Her eyes fluttered, half closed, half dreaming. As memories wove themselves into the darkness, a hand brushing her cheek, a promise whispered in another life, gold eyes beneath the blood-red moon, far away. Across mountains and forests, drowned in frost, the Alpha King woke. The fire in his chest roared to life, his mark searing beneath skin that had forgotten warmth. Pain struck him first, sharp and ancient, followed by a name he did not yet remember. He rose from his bed of furs, breath unsteady, and the walls trembled with his movement. The air smelled of snow and destiny. His wolves lifted their heads as one uneasy, their instincts answering to a command that had not yet been spoken. He looked toward the horizon where the storm raged and whispered a single word into the silence, a word the moon itself seemed to carry, mate. And somewhere beneath that same moon, buried in the snow, her heart answered. The storm had begun to tire when they found her. The Alpha King's patrol moved through the blizzard like ghosts, their cloaks stiff with frost, their breaths forming halos of white around their muzzles. The world had gone still, that eerie stillness that comes when death finishes its work. One of the wolves halted, his paw pressing into something soft beneath the snow. He brushed the frost aside and froze. A woman lay there, her skin pale as the moon, her lashes dusted with ice. "She's gone," he murmured, his voice breaking against the wind. Another lost to the storm. But the leader of the patrol, Daron, the king's first lieutenant, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Something in the air thrummed, ancient and unseen, a pull that stirred the wolf within him. "No," he said quietly, "this one isn't just anyone." He knelt beside her, gloved fingers hovering over her wrist, unsure whether to disturb the fragile beauty of her stillness. There was no breath, no heartbeat. Yet something shimmered faintly beneath her skin, a warmth the snow could not extinguish. The others shifted uneasily. "We should leave her," one said. "The king forbade us from bringing back the dead." Daron looked up at the sky, where the moon broke through a tear in the clouds, its light falling in a perfect circle upon her. "And what if she's not dead?" he whispered. He didn't wait for an answer. He signaled for the men to lift her carefully, wrapping her in his cloak as they carried her toward the waiting horses. A sound like distant thunder rolled across the mountains. Miles away, in his throne room of ice and fire, the Alpha King rose abruptly, his golden eyes flaring open. His mark burned again, searing through flesh and time. The scent of snow, blood, and destiny filled his lungs. He knew then, before dawn touched the horizon, that his fate had been found among the dead. The storm had begun to tire when they found her. The Alpha King's patrol moved through the blizzard like ghosts, their cloaks stiff with frost, their breaths forming halos of white around their muzzles. The world had gone still, that eerie stillness that comes when death finishes its work. One of the wolves halted, his paw pressing into something soft beneath the snow. He brushed the frost aside and froze. A woman lay there, her skin pale as the moon, her lashes dusted with ice. "She's gone," he murmured, his voice breaking against the wind. Another lost to the storm. But the leader of the patrol, Daron, the king's first lieutenant, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Something in the air thrummed, ancient and unseen, a pull that stirred the wolf within him. "No," he said quietly. "This one isn't just anyone." He knelt beside her, gloved fingers hovering over her wrist, unsure whether to disturb the fragile beauty of her stillness. There was no breath, no heartbeat. Yet something shimmered faintly beneath her skin, a warmth the snow could not extinguish. The others shifted uneasily. "We should leave her," one said. "The king forbade us from bringing back the dead." Darren looked up at the sky, where the moon broke through a tear in the clouds, its light falling in a perfect circle upon her. "And what if she's not dead?" He whispered. He didn't wait for an answer. He signaled for the men to lift her carefully, wrapping her in his cloak as they carried her toward the waiting horses. A sound like distant thunder rolled across the mountains. Miles away, in his throne room of ice and fire, the Alpha King rose abruptly, his golden eyes flaring open. His mark burned again, searing through flesh and time. The scent of snow, blood, and destiny filled his lungs. He knew then, before dawn touched the horizon, that his fate had been found among the dead. The world seemed to still when he rode into the valley. The storm, once howling like a wounded god, bowed into silence as if recognizing its sovereign. Snow spiraled gently now, weaving through the air like ash from some sacred fire. The Alpha King's cloak, black as the forgotten night, dragged behind him in a trail of frost and authority. His golden eyes burned beneath the hood, each blink a flare of memory he did not yet understand. But his heart, that cursed ancient heart, knew. It had been waiting for this moment through centuries of cold sleep. His men parted as he approached. There, on a stretcher of pine branches, lay the girl the storm had tried to hide. Her skin glimmered faintly under the moon, her lips pale as rose petals long pressed between the pages of time. For a moment, the king did not breathe. The scent of her blood, faint but pure, reached him familiar, impossibly so. He dismounted without a word, boots crunching through snow that refused to stain until he touched it. Kneeling beside her, he brushed the frost from her cheek. The cold recoiled. The night sighed. And in that breath, the bond flared to life. Light rippled beneath her skin, gold meeting silver, destiny answering destiny. The mark over his chest ignited in response, scorching through the layers of fur and armor. His men stumbled back, shielding their eyes from the brilliance. But he did not move. He only whispered her name, a name he shouldn't have known, yet it slipped from his tongue as though carved into his soul. Lyra. Her body shivered. A soft sound escaped her throat, the faintest gasp. The king's pulse thundered. He leaned closer, feeling the fragile warmth returning under his hand. The snow melted around them, forming a halo of steam in the moonlight. He could feel her heart calling to his weak, uncertain, but alive. The storm broke apart, scattering into quiet. And in that silence, the Alpha King understood the dead girl was never meant to die. She was meant to awaken for him asterisk for a heartbeat. There was only stillness, a silence so deep it felt holy. The Alpha King held his palm to her chest, feeling nothing at first, only the soft resistance of skin chilled by death. Then, faintly, a tremor. It began as a whisper beneath his hand, a pulse struggling through ice. Then another, stronger, defiant. Her body shuddered, a breath breaking through cracked lips as the frost hissed away from her lungs. The sound of it made every wolf bow its head. Life had returned where death had sworn its claim. Her eyes fluttered open. They were not the dull gray of the frozen. They were silver fire reflecting the moon's tears. Confusion rippled through them first, then pain, then recognition, a recognition that neither of them could explain, yet both understood. She tried to rise, but her limbs obeyed neither fear nor command. The king steadied her gently, his touch burning against her skin. She flinched. The warmth was too real, too sudden after the endless cold. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice like wind through broken glass. "Between death and destiny," he answered. His tone carried weight, not of authority, but of memory. She stared up at him, at the golden eyes that glowed with something ancient. The scent of him, pine, smoke, and storm wrapped around her like a forgotten dream. The world seemed to contract until only they remained, a girl reborn of snow, and a king reborn of fire dot around them. The wolves knelt without command. The light from their marks shimmered faintly, answering the call of their king's bond. The snow that had buried her began to retreat, melting in slow circles until earth met air, until frost turned to breath. Her heartbeat steadied, syncing with his two rhythms, weaving into one. The Alpha King drew her closer, lowering his forehead to hers. "You are not lost," he murmured. "You were found." And in that fragile contact, the moon itself seemed to weep for the girl who returned, and the king who had waited lifetimes to feel her heartbeat again. The warmth spreading through her veins was strange, almost cruel in its beauty. It felt like waking inside a memory, one she had not chosen to keep. Her eyes searched the snow around her, seeing not the present, but the ghosts of what had been. The laughter of her pack still echoed faintly, cruel and familiar, carried on the wind like a curse that refused to die. She saw their faces again. Marcus, his mouth twisted into false pity. Alara, who had called her sister before sinking her claws into betrayal. The past bled into the now, and every heartbeat dragged another wound to the surface. Her body trembled, not from cold this time, but from the violence of remembering. "They left me," she whispered, her voice breaking on the word "left." The Alpha King's gaze did not waver. "Then they have written their own fate," he said, his tone low, dangerous, not anger, but promise. His hand brushed the side of her face, thumb tracing the frost that still clung to her skin. "Tell me their names," he murmured, "so that the moon may know whom it must judge." She shook her head weakly. "No, let them live with what they did. The snow will remember." The king's lips curved, not in amusement, but in a sorrowful respect. "Spoken like a queen who has already begun to rise," he said softly. She turned away, the weight of her memories pressing down again. The pain too sharp, the mercy she once believed in now shattered. Still, something in his voice steadied her, an echo of strength she didn't know she had. His cloak slid from his shoulders, heavy and warm, and he wrapped it around her trembling form. "Rest," he said. "The hunt begins when you are whole again." For the first time since the night she was left to die, she closed her eyes not from exhaustion, but from safety. And though she did not know it yet, the man who cradled her beneath the dying storm was not her savior. He was the prophecy her pain had called. When she woke again, the world had changed its color. The storm was gone, replaced by the quiet breath of dawn creeping across the snow. A fire burned close, steady and low, its orange light trembling against the walls of the tent around her. For a moment she thought she was dreaming again. The warmth felt unreal, almost cruel after the endless cold. She lifted her hand toward the flames, afraid it might vanish like every other mercy she had known. Outside, she could hear the wolves, distant, restless. Their growls were not of threat, but of reverence, a chorus shaped by awe. Somewhere among them, a deeper voice carried, the Alpha King giving orders. Even without seeing him, she could feel his presence, vast and consuming. Pressing against the edges of the night, the flap of the tent moved, and he entered. The firelight caught his face, sharp and tired, carved by duty and something older than sorrow. The golden of his eyes had dimmed now, softened into the shade of dawn. He said nothing at first, only poured a small measure of broth into a wooden cup and offered it to her. She hesitated, searching his expression for the cruelty she'd come to expect. There was none. "You should drink," he said quietly. "The cold takes more than it gives." She took the cup, fingers brushing his gloved hand. The contact sparked through her like a memory she could not name. "Why did you save me?" she asked. He looked at the fire instead of her. "Because the snow was trembling," he said. "It never trembles unless it's afraid of what it holds." Her heart faltered, torn between gratitude and fear. She wanted to hate him, to believe he was another illusion sent by a merciless moon, yet something in his voice dismantled her defenses. Outside, dawn climbed the ridges, and for the first time, light found her without burning. She was alive, and the man before her was the reason, or perhaps the warning, by the second dawn. The ache in her limbs had softened into memory. She rose slowly, her breath still clouding in the chilled morning air. And each movement felt like a conversation between her body and the earth, a negotiation. They walked beneath the ancient pines, where light fractured into silver shards between the branches. Snow still clung to the roots, but it no longer seemed hostile. It glittered softly, as though the forest itself wished to bless her steps. The wolves trailed behind, their paws silent on the softened ground, eyes gleaming with reverence. Every sound felt deliberate, the creak of bark, the breath of wind. the slow cadence of her heartbeat aligning with the king's. The Alpha King moved beside her, tall and wordless, his presence as steady as the mountains. Once or twice she glanced at him, and each time it was like looking into a reflection she did not understand. The air between them shimmered with something unsaid, something that lived in the space where touch might happen but doesn't yet dare. A sudden gust stirred the trees, and the scent of pine and smoke carried a vision with it. She saw flashes, not dreams, but memories that were too precise to be fantasy. A firelit hall, a crown resting on his brow, her own laughter echoing off stone walls before a storm of swords. Then the image dissolved, leaving her breathless. She stopped walking. "I've seen you before," she whispered. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "You have," he said quietly, "but not in this life." The words struck her like lightning. She wanted to deny them, but the mark on her wrist pulsed, echoing the burn of his own. The wolves stirred uneasily. Even the forest seemed to listen. "How?" she asked. "Fate remembers what time tries to erase," he said. "Once, long ago, I lost you to the fire. Now, the snow has given you back." A shiver passed through her, not from cold, but from recognition. Somewhere deep inside, something ancient stirred, whispering her name not as Lyra, but as the one who returns when the moon forgets its light. And for the first time, she did not fear the memory * the path led them to a river caught in eternal winter, a mirror of glass stretching from mountain to mountain. Beneath its crystal surface, the current still moved, whispering secrets of things that refused to die. The air there felt thinner, charged, as though the veil between worlds had worn away. She stepped closer, drawn by a memory she did not yet own. Her reflection wavered on the ice, a pale face framed by raven hair, eyes that had seen death and returned from it. But beside her reflection stood his, the Alpha King, unchanging, bound to hers like shadow to flame. He joined her at the edge, silent. The wind carried the scent of iron and old ash. "This place remembers," he said quietly. His breath fogged the air like smoke from a sacred fire. "Once, this river ran red. I crossed it to bring you home." She knelt, touching the ice with trembling fingers. Beneath her palm, a faint warmth pulsed, as if the river's heart still beat. Images flared to figures on a battlefield drowned in flame, her voice shouting his name before arrows tore the sky apart. His hands had caught her then, just as they did now. But the fire had claimed her before the dawn. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Her chest rose sharply. She looked at him, trembling. "I remember. I burned." He nodded, eyes heavy with centuries. "And I froze," he answered, "until you called me back through the storm." The wind softened. A thin crack ran through the river's surface, releasing a low hum, not of danger, but of awakening. The forest bowed as if listening to their reunion. Their reflections no longer stood apart. They merged, gold and silver melting together across the glassy surface, bound by something older than life, older even than fate. He took her hand, his voice low, reverent. Fire and frost, life and death, they've tried to keep us apart in every age. But each time, we find our way back. And for a heartbeat, even time itself seemed to bow in agreement. Asterisk, the hum beneath the river deepened, turning into a tremor that rippled through the ground. Cracks splintered across the ice like veins of light, glowing faintly beneath their feet. The air thickened, charged with the same ancient force that had once bound them and then torn them apart. She stepped back instinctively, but the earth shifted beneath her boots. A fracture raced toward her, quick, merciless, and the river screamed as the ice gave way. "Lyra!" His voice cut through the roar as she plunged into the black water. The cold seized her lungs like chains, dragging her into darkness. For an instant, she was back in the flames again, the memory of fire and death colliding with the shock of freezing water. Her body convulsed, air tearing from her throat in silent panic. The light above blurred into a halo of gold. Then, through the chaos, a hand broke through the surface, strong, unyielding. The Alpha King dove in after her, the river closing around him like a living curse. The cold clawed at his skin, but he moved through it like a blade through fog, guided not by sight, but by the bond that pulsed between them. He found her, limp and weightless, her hair unfurling in the current like ribbons of ink. He pulled her close, pressing his mouth to hers, forcing air, warmth, life back into her lungs. The river fought them, desperate to keep what it had claimed. But his power flared, his mark burning bright beneath the water, gold bleeding through blue. The current stilled, the ice knitting itself back together in trembling obedience. He lifted her into his arms and rose from the depths. Water cascading from their forms in ribbons of light. Her body coughed once, twice, and she gasped, the sound of the living cutting through the quiet world. His arms tightened around her, his breath ragged, his voice trembling not with fear but reverence. "I lost you to fire once," he whispered. "I will not lose you to ice." And as the river fell silent again, the snow began to fall, soft, forgiving, as though the heavens themselves had exhaled in relief. Asterisk. He carried her from the river as though cradling a secret too precious for the world to see. Water dripped from their bodies, tracing silver trails down his arms before vanishing into the snow. The forest bowed around them, its branches bending low, as if bearing witness to a coronation of life reclaimed from death. His breath came in heavy clouds. Hers fluttered shallow but steady against his chest. When he laid her upon the moss at the river's edge, the earth itself seemed to warm beneath her. Her lashes trembled. The glow of his mark mirrored faintly upon her skin. She stirred, eyes opening to the dim light filtering through the canopy. "Why do you keep saving me?" she whispered. Her voice was weak, yet it struck him like a blade of truth. He knelt beside her, pressing a hand against the damp earth. "Because your soul is bound to mine," he said quietly. "You are not meant to end, not until I do." She frowned, confusion shadowing her features. Bound. He nodded. Long ago, before names, before crowns, a curse was cast upon the first of my bloodline. Every alpha born of my line would carry the same mark, and each would find his heart bound to a single soul. When she dies, he withers. When he falters, she burns. We are each other's prison and salvation. The truth sank into her like winter rain, cold, inescapable, heavy. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from understanding. She touched the faint symbol glowing upon her wrist. It pulsed in time with his. Then my return was no mercy he finished for her. It was the curse remembering itself. The wind rose, stirring the river into ripples that glimmered like gold veins under ice. He looked away, the pain behind his calm betraying centuries of endurance. "I thought I was saving you," he murmured. "But perhaps it's you who has come to end my curse." She met his gaze, and for a moment, even fate dared not breathe. Asterisk night descended in shades of indigo as they reached the ruins, stone arches long devoured by ivy, their carvings softened by centuries of frost and moonlight. The place breathed with age. Every crack in the walls whispered old names, the remnants of vows and curses that had outlived their makers. She felt it the moment they stepped inside, a weight in the air, heavy and watching. The torches the king's men carried flickered low, their flames bending as if bowing to unseen masters. "This was once our temple," he said quietly, his voice carrying the tone of reverence and regret. "Before my kind were kings, we were keepers of balance. But greed and grief twisted that duty into dominion." His hand brushed against the worn stone, tracing a sigil that still pulsed faintly under his touch, the mark of the Alpha line, glowing like a sleeping ember. The curse began here. She looked around, and the air shimmered faintly, as if the past were trying to bleed through. Faint echoes of chanting drifted across the broken courtyard. Not quite sound, not quite memory. The shadows on the walls formed shapes, wolves with human eyes, men with claws, all bowing before a woman wreathed in light. Her chest tightened. The image vanished, but the sorrow it left behind remained. "The spirits," she whispered, glancing at him. "They're still here." He nodded once. "They never left. They wait for the curse to end or for it to begin again." The wind sighed through the ruins, carrying a sound like distant howling. It wasn't hostile, but mournful, an echo of the bloodline's eternal lament. She felt it then, a faint vibration in her bones. The same hum that had called to him through the storm. Her gaze met his, and the truth lay unspoken between them. Whatever force had tied their souls together had been born here, in these ruins, not as a blessing, but as a promise written in sorrow and somewhere deep within the stones. Something ancient stirred, recognizing the return of both its curse and its cure. Asterisk. The wind that wound through the ruins carried more than cold. It carried memory. It moved like a living thing, curling around her, threading through her hair, whispering words that made no sound yet vibrated deep within her chest. She closed her eyes, and the whispers became clearer, soft, pleading, endless. A chorus of lost voices, bound by the same chain that shackled the king's bloodline. Daughter of the moon, keeper of endings. The words were not heard but felt, spoken by spirits that had forgotten their own names. The stones beneath her feet hummed, and a faint light began to glow from the carvings on the walls, as if awakening to her presence. She stumbled back, frightened, but his hand steadied her. "Do you hear them?" she breathed. "I've heard them all my life," he said, "but never like this." The light brightened, golden threads tracing through the ancient sigils, converging toward her. Her wrist burned the mark, blazing to life again. The same fire surged through his chest, their pain synchronizing, not as torment, but as summoning. The air thickened. Even the wolves outside whimpered, sensing power older than blood. Visions flashed before her eyes, wolves bowing to a silver flame. A woman cloaked in moonlight, binding a man with eyes of gold. The curse was born not from hatred, but from love that defied the gods. The punishment had been simple: to love eternally, to lose eternally. Until one heart chose to break the chain, her knees weakened. "I am her," she whispered, "the one who sealed you, the one who must unmake what she began." The king's eyes darkened with sorrow and awe. "Then fate has returned us to the beginning," he said softly. "But this time the end will be yours to choose." The whispers faded, leaving behind a silence that trembled with possibility. The ruins pulsed once more, alive, as if holding its breath, waiting for her decision. The world tilted, and the ruins dissolved around her. The cold vanished, replaced by the warmth of firelight licking at stone pillars. She stood in a hall of gold and shadow, a place she knew yet could not name. The air was thick with the scent of pine and steel, and the echo of laughter and clashing blades filled the space like distant thunder. Her hands trembled as she looked down. The same mark glowed upon her skin, but it was older, deeper, pulsing like a second heart. He was there to the Alpha King as he had once been. Not the man carved by sorrow and centuries, but younger, fierce, radiant with life. His eyes found hers across the hall, and everything else fell away. She remembered this the first time they met. The night the gods themselves turned to watch, in the vision, he walked to her through the firelight, the crown upon his head glinting like dawn breaking over a battlefield. "You shouldn't be here," he'd said then, his tone half warning, half wonder. She had only smiled. "Neither should you." But the vision shifted, the warmth curdled into chaos. The hall burned, screams filled the air, and the god's wrath descended like lightning. She saw herself kneeling beside his fallen body, blood on her hands, the mark between them still burning. A woman cloaked in light, a goddess, or perhaps fate itself, had appeared before her, offering one choice: bind him or lose him forever. Tears blurred her sight. She had chosen the curse, believing it mercy. She had chained his soul to eternity, binding him to life without end, condemning both of them to endless reunion and loss. Her knees hit the stone floor of the vision, breath breaking in her throat. The goddess's voice echoed through the fading flames. Every vow is a circle. It returns, waiting to be broken by the one who dared to make it. The fire died, and the ruins returned, but she was trembling, her heart torn between love and regret. The king knelt before her eyes, soft, already knowing. "You remember?" he whispered, and she did. She awoke with tears already on her face. The ruins were still, the torches reduced to embers, the night heavy with the taste of prophecy. The Alpha King sat nearby, silent, watching her as if afraid that a single word might break whatever fragile truth now bound them. She drew a breath, tasting the metallic scent of old magic on the air. The echo of the vision still burned behind her eyes. The hall of fire. The goddess, the vow she had made in another life. Her hands shook. She pressed them against her heart, feeling the mark pulsing in painful rhythm. "I cursed you," she whispered. The words trembled like confession, like prayer. "I bound your soul to mine." He nodded slowly. "And now you remember the price." "I thought I was saving you," she said, voice raw. "But I condemned you instead." He rose then, the motion quiet but immense. The firelight painted him in shades of gold and shadow. "You saved me," he answered. "You gave me eternity when the gods demanded my end. Do not mistake mercy for sin. But eternity without peace is not life," she replied, her voice breaking. "It's a cage." The silence that followed was thick, filled with the ache of centuries. The spirits in the ruins stirred again, their whispers softer now, no longer warning, but waiting. She felt them gather around her, pressing gently against her mind. One heart must break to set the other free. Her gaze lifted to him. "If I end the curse, if I sever the bond, you'll fade." He met her eyes, unflinching. "Then let me fade," he said. "Better an end by your hand than another eternity without you." Tears blurred the world. The light from their marks intertwined, gold and silver weaving one final promise into the air. The ruins trembled, sensing that fate had at last returned to claim its due, and for the first time since the gods bound their souls. She understood what mercy truly meant. The moon climbed high. A single silver eye watching the world hold its breath. The ruins glowed faintly, every carving alive with old light. The wolves circled the perimeter in solemn silence, their heads bowed, their howls trapped in their throats. At the center of the courtyard stood a stone altar veined with ice, the mark of the first curse still carved upon its surface. The Alpha King stood before it, his golden eyes steady, the faintest tremor hiding behind his calm. She stepped toward him, barefoot, the hem of her cloak dragging through the frost. The spirits moved around her like wind through reeds, their whispers forming a single word that seemed to come from the very bones of the earth. Release. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the moon might hear it. "Tell me what to do," she said. He shook his head. "You already know." And she did. Somewhere in the depths of her soul, beneath the lifetimes of sorrow and rebirth, the ritual weight degged in the same light that now burned through her veins. She pressed her palms against his chest, over the mark that bound them both. It blazed beneath her touch, gold spilling through her fingers like liquid dawn. He did not flinch. He only closed his eyes, breathing her in as though this final breath might carry him through eternity. "I was meant to end this," she whispered. "Not as your punishment, but as your peace, Ta." He smiled faintly, weary and beautiful. "Then let me rest in your memory." The air thickened, humming with power. Light burst from their joined hands, racing up the pillars, spiraling into the night sky. The wolves began to howl not in grief, but in reverence as the energy gathered, forming a column of gold and silver that reached the moon itself. The ruins trembled. The mark burned bright, and she felt his heartbeat falter beneath her hands. The curse was breaking. The bond was unweaving. And with every pulse of light, she could feel him slipping away like the tide retreating from the shore of her soul. Asterisk light swallowed the night. It poured from their joined hands, climbing the ruined arches, spilling across the snow until every shadow turned to gold. The sound was not thunder or wind, but the soft crack of a promise finally breaking. The mark on her wrist flared once brilliant, unbearably, and then dimmed. She felt his heartbeat stutter beneath her palms, one final pulse echoing through her own chest as though two hearts had chosen to share a single farewell. The glow faded. The ruins fell silent. When she opened her eyes, he was still before her, but the frost had settled in his hair like a crown of ash. He smiled, faint and certain, the kind of smile worn by men who have made peace with forever. "You kept your vow," he murmured. His voice was a breath already dissolving. "And you gave me my end." She reached for him, but her fingers passed through light. His body was turning to shimmer, threads of gold unraveling into the air. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not like this." "Every ending is mercy," he said softly. "And every mercy is love." Then he was gone. Only warmth remained hovering in the shape of his touch. The wolves lifted their voices, their howls carrying through the dawn a requiem and a coronation entwined. The ruins, once cursed, gleamed with new color as the first sunlight touched them. Frost melted into streams that ran clear for the first time in centuries. She sank to her knees, the world around her reborn in silence. Her tears struck the altar and turned to silver, tracing symbols of release across the stone. Above her, the moon began to fade into morning, and she whispered into the light, "Sleep, my king. I will carry your name where even gods cannot follow." A soft wind answered, brushing her hair aside a final echo of him. The curse was broken, but love remained eternal and unseen, lingering in the hush between heartbeats and the snow that would forever remember their story.